Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. So today's session is focused on the use of automation technology to find and mitigate EUC risk. The title, of course, says in one day, and many of the methods and technologies we're going to show today can actually be implemented in under an hour. This is software focused, but not all the software we're going to talk about today has a price. Some of the tools are actually free. So with that, let's get started. In terms of our agenda, it's relatively short today. This should come in just at 30 minutes or a little under. And our primary objective is simply create awareness. We're not going to get into details, but if you have further inquiry on how this actually gets done or how it might apply to your company, please contact us. The three primary approaches to cover today are the discovery, scanning of whether it's a network drive, file shares, the use of technology for systematic error checking, and the use of technology for continuous monitoring of EUC files in a change management mode, whether it be audit trails or implementation of approval workflows, etc. And then again, in the summary, I am going to review how much time each of these tasks actually takes, both to install and ultimately execute the functionality that we're going to describe today. So in terms of relevant risk technology, there's really four types. We're going to focus on three of them today, but there's the automated scanning, and this is at one level just high-speed, at-scale discovery. What end-user controlled files do we have out there in our network and or on our personal drives? And then the use of that technology, not simply to identify and quantify kind of the raw numbers, but to actually go inside the files, take a look, and do a level of risk assessment. The model and EUC inventory solutions are pretty obvious, and there's multiple options for that. Automated change management in terms of continuous audit trails, approval workflows, as I spoke about previously. And then the fourth area that we are going to spend some time on are EUC diagnostic, error checking tools, analysis tools for best practice, and these are highly Excel-centric. So we're going to talk about primarily three of the four and not so much on the inventory. So let's dive in and talk about scanning. There's really two types or two levels of scanning. One is at a high level, and the second is in depth. So at the high level, it's very high speed. You can scan over 1 million files an hour, sometimes a couple million files an hour, depending on the type. It really is looking at the file at a macro level, reading properties, understanding last modified date, size, and the purpose is somewhat of a triage. So when you're looking at, especially for corporate network drives and file shares, there are literally millions and millions of files. And just to get a good understanding of, which of these files are the ones that I'm interested in taking a closer look at. So typically a PDF is something that you're not interested in taking a close look at. But an Excel file that might be a model or have some degree of complex, calculations or data transformations involved, that would be an EUC of interest. You notice we have two product names there, EUC Discovery Business and EUC Discovery Desktop. The desktop product is a free product, and it's focused on helping individuals just analyze their local C drive. And that's a tool that you can download for free, install within 10 minutes, run, and within a couple minutes, have an inventory of what EUCs are on your personal drive. So that's something that can be done very quickly, very inexpensively. The tools to look at network drives are server-based, but they actually install quite quickly. You would need IT assistance in order to do that and admin privileges, so that's not something an end user could do. But in customers we've worked with, we've gotten the software installed and scanned several million files all before lunch. Once you do the high-level scanning and identify the files that you want to take a look at, you can then go in and do a second scan of those files of particular interest, namely Excel being a major one. And this type of scan will actually go inside the file, and it will look and analyze various risk factors. It will automate the collection of risk-related metadata. Sometimes that metadata exists in the form of attestations on a cover sheet, or there's other ways to attach attestations and risk questionnaire type information to the file. And the scanning can actually pick up that information, bring it back, and store it in a central database for later reporting. So the scanning technology can be very simple and quick, or it can be in-depth and yield quite a bit of information. I'm going to go through two case studies here. One was a client that we worked with to look at some network drives within their finance department. And in this particular case, we scanned a file that had 3.2 million files in it. One of the things you can see very quickly across the top is the age distribution. So obviously everything is skewed toward the later dates, but even if you look at, let's say, 2004, there's 15,000 files from 2004. There's 12,000 there's 12,000 for 2004. There's 15,000 odd files in 2005. And this is a company that has a records retention policy of anything older than 7 years needs to be archived. So right off the bat, it's telling you something about compliance to records retention and potentially the risk of having that type of data still hanging around. You can see it gives a breakdown of file type. Again, in the EUC world, we're not so much interested in a Word doc as we would be in an Excel document. And the further breakdown of these files helps you understand some of the complexity aspects of this. You know, typically a higher risk file is connected to a lot of other spreadsheets. So, for example, here you can see that there's almost 1,700 files that are connected to between 5 and 10 other spreadsheets. Also, scanning technology can help look at connections to corporate databases. So this type of looking inside the file and being able to see, the degree of complexity, which again is indicative of the degree of risk, is very helpful. And keep in mind, this is a machine doing this in the background and doing it at literally thousands and thousands of files per hour. So it's actually simple to do. Once it's running, it's transparent. Users don't know that it's happening, but it can yield a lot of information for both the second-line risk people and even the IT people. The second area of automation that I'm going to talk about involves Excel model and tool analysis. So, one of the challenges when working with end-user controlled applications is, quite frankly, the users are reluctant to participate. We often joke that it's end-user controlled for a reason. They've developed these applications for very specific purposes, or they need flexibility, they need speed, and need to be able to do this quickly. And they're often reluctant to have any type of control. And so you often get into debates as to what's a model, or what is a file that's of sufficient complexity and or risk that it should have some controls. And when you use a software tool to analyze this, you can get a very objective measurement of various risk factors like the presence of macro code. How many unique formulas are in this file? You know, some of our customers have files with 4 million formulas in them. Obviously, that's a complex, high-risk file. And again, as we spoke about on the scanning, you can understand the quantity and complexity of the external data links. Another aspect of a high-risk file is that it's often connected to multiple data sources, whether those be an enterprise relational database. Perhaps you're getting extracts from SAP and putting those into Excel. Sometimes there's data transformations where the Excel sheet isn't the ultimate model itself, but it's a feeder. It feeds into some other system. And being able to understand that linkage and what are the weak links in the chain or the high-risk links of the chain, it's very important to understand that. It's often difficult, if you can imagine parsing through a spreadsheet, cell by cell, trying to find those links. These types of tools can find those links automatically and then display them in a visual way that's easy for everyone to understand. And then thirdly, there's there's an array, the number is over 50, of diagnostic checks that are automatically performed with these types of tools in order to gauge the degree of best practice use, things like checking for formulas that have constants, or looking for cells that might have white text on a white background and be indicative of some type of hidden formula or code that might be fraud-related. So all of this can take place within these Excel-based tools. And there's really, again, there's two flavors to these. The most common takes the form of an Excel plugin. Simcon's product is called Excel Audit. Our competitors actually have other products by other names, but these are focused around the individual, and they're quite comprehensive in their features. But another flavor is probably not the best word, but another way that these tools can be utilized is at the departmental or group level. And so essentially this is a server. It sits on your internet within your firewall, and so it eliminates the need for local PC installations or plug-in installations. And for larger companies who don't want to get involved in the packaging of desktop solutions, that's a big plus. Another thing is once you put it up on the server, it's available to everyone. You don't have to worry about individual licensing or user counts or any of that admin type functionality. And the main difference, and this is a huge feature when compared to all of the PC plug-in-based tools, is that essentially the user can submit their spreadsheet or model for error checking and then continue to work in Excel. So it's almost like a remote batch job. You submit the file for error checking, it goes off on the server, it checks for errors, it sends you an email with the results when it's done. And you can do that not only single file at a time, but you can also do that for multiple files and essentially send off a folder that contains multiple models or tools for analysis. So this concept of doing this on an individual level or making this type of capability on available on a much wider basis, group, departmental, even enterprise. Both of those options are open. So the third area that I'm going to talk about is change management. There are, again, kind of two ways to do change management. So one is with full-featured server-based software. SimCon's family of automated change management tools fall under the EUC Insight brand. But you can also do basic change management, essentially mini audit trails, if you will, via the Excel audit product that we just spoke about. And so you have kind of the simpler, more basic, less expensive option, and then you have the more comprehensive, albeit more complex and, if we're honest, more expensive server-based solutions of EUC Insight. When you go with the server-based solutions, you get a lot more capability in terms of, being able to centrally administer the locking of critical formulas. There's a lot of enhanced information security functionality. Some of the controls around access and versioning and being able to understand, here is a parent file, here's all the derivatives that have been derived from that file, who owns them, who's been changing them. The audit trails on the server products are continuous. It takes place in the background and essentially is functioning and monitoring on a 24/7 basis, requires no interaction from the user, whereas if you use the simpler Excel audit product, in order to get an audit trail, that would require the user to actually submit a file for comparison. So again, change management can be done in a very comprehensive and systematic way, or it can be done on a more basic level when you consider that most companies aren't doing anything today. If you do something, that's an improvement and a step in the right direction. We're not going to spend a lot of time on inventory today, but inventory actually is the foundation for good EUC risk management. There are a couple options from a software perspective in terms of ways to manage and track the inventory. SimCon offers a service. Essentially, it's inventory as a service in the form of software as a service, EUC Inventory Cloud. Again, this will automate the updating and capture of risk metadata, whether that be a questionnaire, e.g., is this file used in part of our financial reporting processes? Yes or no. Is this file part of a control? Yes or no. There may be an attestation where you ask the end users to certify that they, in fact, have had this file, checked and it has undergone some type of peer review. So establishing inventories is actually relatively easy. It's making sure that they're accurate and up to date is where the trick comes in. And so using a tool like Inventory Cloud, which by definition doesn't require any installation on your premises, is a nice, clean way to do that. One thing I want to emphasize is that your proprietary file does not leave your company. So your file remains within your firewall. It's only the risk metadata, things like the owner, the last date it's been validated, the attestation information. That's the type of metadata that's stored in the cloud, but the file itself remains on site. And then, as part of the EUC Insight family that I was just speaking about in terms of comprehensive change management, again, that's an on-premises server-based solution that's integrated with change management. So you have those two options there in terms of kind of commercial applications that are focused specifically at this task. But you can also take advantage of the commercial cloud platforms, whether it be SharePoint Online, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive. All of those repositories in the cloud actually have some degree of controls. There are some basic controls that come with those platforms at no extra charge. So if your company has made a decision to store user file shares and Office files, et cetera, in the cloud, you actually can get some of your controls, especially as it relates to inventory, from that platform. So it's something that's there, and you can take advantage of that. Obviously, when it comes to inventory, you can keep track of things through a manual list, but that, of course, is not automated. So just trying to wrap up from a summary perspective in terms of ways that automation can bring practical value to day-to-day operations. So the end game in all of this is really about reducing errors. Even if you're driven by regulatory compliance, especially for those in financial services, the end goal of the regulations is to reduce errors, whether it be reduce the errors in models or reduce errors in other calculations that can affect capital reserves and so forth. So the goal of all of this is reducing errors, followed very closely by enhancing information security to ensure that there's no breach or inadvertent data loss. And when you think about using automation in pursuit of those goals, there's the discovery capability of quantifying the model and EUC landscape. How many of these do we have? Who owns them? Who's responsible? What is the degree of risk? What are the high-risk files, the medium, the low, et cetera? The administration of criticality questionnaires, attestations, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to use automation for that. Whilst you can put together manual lists of inventory, it's practically impossible to keep those up to date. There's never enough people to chase down all of the owners. When you start talking about EUCs and the fact that there's on average about 3,000 per person in a company, if your company is of any size at all, the numbers quickly just become impossible to manually track all of this stuff. So the idea of the system understanding the critical files and staying on top of making sure that metadata is current and kept up to date is really important. The concept of objective, systematic risk assessment, not relying on an individual to determine that a file is complex or high risk or not, especially when that person often has an incentive to declare that it's not high risk so that they fly under the radar of some of the compliance and governance frameworks. So having something that's objective there is a huge plus in the right direction. Obviously, to be able to report on your compliance throughout the company. The larger you are, the more important that factor becomes. If you're a small company, you can probably walk around and talk to people and get a good feel for whether you're in compliance or not. But the larger you are, that becomes almost impossible. Again, automation of the attestation process, having automatic updates go out, remind people, being able to derive exception reports and see who hasn't updated that information, all of that's critical. And the final point to make there is that these types of capabilities are somewhat standalone. So collectively, they all are a component of a comprehensive EUC risk management framework, but you don't have to do them together. You can do one, you can do two, you can do three. Really the mix and match type of approach works here. So these technologies are not all interconnected such that you have to do all of them. You can pick and choose as you see fit. So this last slide here, the title of my talk was about better EUC risk management inside of one day. And I wanted to give you a feel for how long these software products actually take to install and implement and ultimately use. So when we think about EUC discovery, if you remember, we have a free forever product that you can download off our website. You can download that product, install it on your PC, and get an inventory of your local C drive and do all of that inside of 30 minutes. So if you start thinking about the network and network file share scanning technology, that will, again, process millions and millions of files in a morning or an afternoon. That is a server-based product, but installs very quickly. It's not a difficult configuration at all. The last one we did at a client, from start to finish, was probably 15, 20 minutes on the install, and then by lunchtime we had scanned 4 of the network drives representing about 8 million files. So that goes very, very quickly from a scanning perspective. When you think about the error checking tools, again, remember there were 2 types. There's the local PC-based add-in or plug-in to Excel. Again, those tools install inside of 5 minutes. If you're in a corporate controlled environment, you're working in a very large company where there's strict controls over what can be installed on a desktop, that process actually, the technical aspect of it pales in comparison to the bureaucratic aspect. But assuming you had admin rights to your PC, you can install that product in less than 5 minutes and then be running the diagnostics and getting the reports, well inside of 30 minutes. There is when you think of the actual day-to-day use and error checking of various files, it is dependent on file size, so some can take longer. But in general, it's a very quick process. From a departmental perspective, again, this was the intranet-based service. That is a server product, but again, can be installed. You, of course, would need IT assistance. But once that server is configured, and again, that installation is quite straightforward, certainly no more than an hour or so. Files can be submitted to that, and you can get answers back in anywhere from 10 minutes to a couple hours, depending on file size. So the error checking is, again, pretty simple to install and fast to use, and not a lot of pain there in terms of typical configurations. When it comes to inventory, And again, along with the automated, collection and reporting on questionnaire answers and attestations, we have the cloud service. With the cloud service, there's no software installation. So you can be up and running at an enterprise level inside of 30 minutes. For on-premises, that takes on the order of 1 to 2 days, maybe even longer if we're honest, because there's typically a lot of configuration that takes place there and the loading of existing inventories. So that's a more complex task that would take it outside of the one-day window that we've spoke about here on this call. And then the last, in terms of change management, again, if you think of a basic audit trail that just takes a snapshot in time of what changes have been made, we have this reconciliation that we do monthly. What's been changed between October and September? That type of analysis and reporting can be done inside of 30 minutes. But if you're going to do change management in a very comprehensive way with, continuous 24/7 audit trails, that's probably the most complicated to configure. The execution of it is instantaneous. It's happening all the time, but it takes a while to set up. So again, that would fall outside the scope of a one-day type project. So that really concludes for this morning. I referred a couple times to the free version of EUC Discovery Desktop. This can be found on our website. It's at the bottom of the EUC Insight product page. So if you follow this link, it'll take you to the product page for EUC Insight, and you scroll to the bottom, and you'll see a section on EUC Discovery Desktop, which is the scanning tool for your local C drive. And again, that's forever free, and you can download that there. In addition, for people who've participated today, we are going to send you a follow-up email that will include a short video that describes the cloud inventory service, something that shows how you can keep track of both your models and your critical EUCs, automate the collection of the attestation data, and do all that without having to install any software on your premises. So with that, we're going to conclude for the day. We appreciate your time, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me directly, Craig Hattabaugh, or contact us through our website. Thank you again.